Hey, I just got back to work, and while I was there, I was reading a book, Liberty Defined by Ron Paul, uh, and I wasn't planning on making a video on this book. In fact, I wasn't even planning on reading the book. I had a lot of extra money laying around, and I decided to buy it, and I was probably just gonna loan it out to other people because, truth be told, I mean, I know where he's coming from most of the time, and I've read most of the books that he uses as sources, and it's not my kind of fare usually. But I was at work. I don't know. It was there, so I started to read it, and I'm not going to do a review because I haven't finished it. But in the uh, for those of you who don't know, it's just 50 essays. Each one's only 2 or 3 pages long, covering 50 different topics, applying basically his philosophy on each of those issues. And they're listed alphabetically. Now, when I read the one on democracy, I basically came to the conclusion of something that I've suspected for a long time, but I wasn't really sure. And that conclusion is that I am basically sure that Ron Paul is a market anarchist. Um, this is something that anybody who is familiar with him or known about him for a long time has likely at least considered, if not already concluded themselves. I know I've had this debate with people. I had this debate with people 3 or 4 years ago, back before he even ran the first time. And, it's really hard to tell with a politician like that. He has explicitly said he's not an anarchist. He's explicitly said he does believe that we need some government. But in this book, he uses sources, but they're really not so much sources as not very subtle hints of things he wants you to read, and they're you know they're the who's list of anarcho-capitalists. You got Rothbard, Mises, Brian Kaplan, Robert Higgs, Lysander Spooner, Hayek, Hans Hermann Hoppe. I mean, they're all there, and he'll even put little notes saying, hey, you should read them. And so, the thing that really gave it away for me was in the democracy chapter, he does cite Lysander Spooner, and he basically correctly mentions Spooner's refutation of social contract theory as put forth in the essay No Treason, the Government, or the Constitution of No Authority. He accurately describes this argument, and then he basically says that it is correct, and then he puts in a note Lysander Spooner, and he encourages everyone to read all of Spooner's work. Now, right after he says this, he goes on to say that Spooner's insights are valid, but since that is too radical for most people right now, it's better to focus on the limited minarchism that you can see in the Constitution. So basically, for me, that's proof positive, or very close to that he is a market anarchist at heart, and that he just does not think that it can happen overnight or very soon, and so he's an incrementalist. And that, by the way, is a very common anarcho-capitalist position. There are many anarcho-capitalists who don't think that we're ready for anarcho-capitalism for any number of reasons. If you listen to someone like Walter Block, he will say, he seems to think that there is some kind of genetic thing that we're pre-wired to have a state. I happen to think that's kind of weird, because for most of human history there weren't states or anything really that you could say are actually analogous to that, and also there is no direct scientific evidence of such a gene. Now, that's not to say that it isn't there, but it's yet to be discovered or even talked about at all. I just watched a video not long ago from guy who wrote a book called Libertarianism, Jacob Hubert, and he basically took the long view as well, although not necessarily for genetic reasons, just ideological reasons. I guess I could see it going either way. I don't think that there is a biological roadblock, so to speak, that makes it impossible. I just think that there are ideological problems, but ideology changes. It can change fairly rapidly, although it's not something that I think that you can control. You can't. I mean, Mises and Rothbard were real big on this. They explicitly wanted to change the views of the masses, and in their lifetimes, I'd have to say that they failed. I mean, they changed some people's minds. But, you know, now that they're dead, they're having more effect now than they ever did in life. And Ron Paul is an exponent of that, and he is doing it. I believe he is doing exactly this, what they were advocating. And I don't think that this is very much of a stretch, because he knew Rothbard personally, was friends with Rothbard. Rothbard thought very highly of him. He hired Rothbard. There is no way that, you know, any anarcho-capitalist conspiracy a la Ron Paul we could imagine is plausible in those circumstances. In fact, I would say likely in those circumstances, given that they knew each other for probably close to 2 decades. I don't think Paul ever met Mises. He wrote a book about Mises, a personal thing, but I don't think he actually met him. But in addition to Rothbard, obviously there's this connection to Lew Rockwell, which is extremely strong. For those of you who don't know, Rockwell was Paul's chief of staff for a long time, and their connection is very strong. And of course, Lew Rockwell is probably the biggest single purveyor of anarcho-capitalism in the world today or ever. So I'd say, putting all this together, that Ron Paul is an incrementalist market anarchist, which is all to the good. In this book, this is basically like a conservative punch that's been spiked with anarcho-capitalist date rape. I mean, he's not super radical really explicitly. You know, he couches things in terms that are understandable and not that radical to most conservatives and even some liberals. But then when he puts in the notes and he tells you, well, you should go read Bryan Caplan or Hans Hermann Hoppe. Hans Hermann Hoppe, the guy who wrote, I mean, he writes a chapter on democracy, and one of the 3 sources, there are 3 sources. One, Bryan Caplan, or I'm sorry, there are 4. Bryan Caplan, who writes a book, he's an anarcho-capitalist who writes a book entitled The Myth of the Rational Voter. Okay, so that's in the democracy chapter. You have Lysander Spooner, who writes a book, or an essay anyway, saying that their social contract is invalid. He has Rothbard, Mr. Libertarian, Mr. Anarcho-Capitalist. And then Hans Hermann Hoppe, who's most famous for a book entitled Democracy, the God That Failed. So those are his sources on the chapter on democracy. You know, not, I don't know, not any celebrated socialist or anything like that. So, and then he encourages you to read those things. So, this isn't new. I think Ron Paul's been doing this. I haven't read any of his other books, but it's my understanding he pretty much always puts reading lists in there, and it's going to be Man, Economy, State, Economics in One Lesson, Human Action, The Road to Serfdom, you know, the classics, and that's all to the good. Oh, Atlas Shrugged. I haven't seen Ayn Rand quoted yet, but I haven't finished the book, so who knows. So, even though, you know, I kind of shy from politics, I am pretty psyched about this Ron Paul thing. I think he is probably going to end up being the most important libertarian in history up to this point, I think. He's already definitely in the running. Not as an intellectual. He's not. He's a smart guy, but he's not an intellectual. But he has pervaded these more than anybody else, with the maybe possible exception of Ayn Rand. But, you know, Ayn Rand pervaded objectivism, which is like bastard libertarianism. I don't mean that to say it's all bad. It's got a lot of good in it, but it's not as comprehensive, I don't think. And lots of people have read Atlas Shrugged, and a lot of people have been affected by it, but I don't know if that many. I mean, a lot of people, Ron Paul, I mean, I know people who will hear about Ron Paul, read 1 or 2 of his books, and within a few months they are an anarcho-capitalist. And I know that anecdotally that happens all the time. I don't know how many in terms of absolute numbers, and it happens all over the world. I don't know that Ayn Rand ever achieved that level. It's debatable. I'm not asserting this absolute. I just wanted to put out, this is something I thought about for a long time, whether he was actually an ANCAP or not. He explicitly denies it, but after reading this book, I'm about as positive as you can be about the intentions of another individual, which is to say you can't really be certain because you never know. Anybody could be lying or putting on a front, and of course he's a politician, which means that's even more likely. But I don't know, it really seems like he is. And so I bought the book, hope the sales go up. The money doesn't go to him, I don't think. That's fine. Makes the sales look better, makes him look more popular, and then I will definitely finish this book, and then I already know who I'll be handing it out to. So, alright, that's it.